right, DJ Crypto here. Today we're going to be talking about specific components that are needed to build a cryptocurrency mining rig, or what I did in the past, an Ethereum mining rig. Now I'm going to show you step by step all the different components that are required, and then I'm going to also give you a bunch of pieces, optional pieces that I found helpful, that aren't absolutely necessary, but I found helpful when building the rig that you could use as well. And then I'm going to show you at the end, I'll put all of the components I purchased, the exact rig I bought, piece by piece, in the comments below. So you can go down there if you're interested in looking at what I purchased. You're welcome to look there as well. And then I'm going to give you, and then we'll talk about what the next video is going to entail, which is going to be what does it cost to get these things going? Is this cost effective? Is this something you want to do? And what are the ramifications of running this? Is it something that's cost effective for you? So, all right, let's go ahead and let's get started. So, first of all, Ethereum mining rig components. So, first of all, we've got the motherboard. Now, motherboard, kind of the body or structural unit of any computer here, and so you've got to have a motherboard. There's one thing that's specific to mining rig motherboards, and I'll show you a picture of one here. Specifically to mining rig motherboards, there's the riser inputs for your video cards, because on a standard mining rig you have more than one video card. On a regular computer, you're running one, maybe two video cards, so there's no need for that many slots. But on a mining rig, you're wanting to get as many video cards as possible so that you can make it as cost efficient as possible. The more cards you get on one rig, the fewer extra parts you need for all your other rigs. So my rigs, I built them with 6 graphics cards each, and so this is the motherboard I used. Again, details below will give you the information you're looking for. But this, you can see right here, there are 6 different ports, and they look a little bit different. You've got one that's extra long, your standard PCI Express port, and then you have 5 little guys here, and those are PCI Express ports as well, but they're specific for risers, and I'll show you a riser once I get to that section. But make sure that the board you're buying has enough PCI Express slots for the number of video cards you want it to support. All right. Other than that, it's really not vital to get a super high-end motherboard. The main piece with all these components are that they're compatible together and that they function. Like if you're going to get a motherboard, make sure it has the same socket type as the CPU you're going to get, because there's different types of sockets that you can have inside your CPU right here. All right, excellent. Next, we got our storage. That's going to be your hard drive or your solid state drive. I recommend a solid state drive just so things boot and run quickly, and can fetch data fast. Solid state drives are more expensive. If you're going to be running a rig where you're downloading the node, you'll probably want a hard drive so that's big enough to download and store the node. But I recommend a small, I use a 60 gigabyte solid state drive. I found them for super cheap on Amazon, and so that's what I'd recommend. A smaller solid state drive, and not something big enough to get you by, but not anything that you need excess space for. All right, next we have RAM. RAM, you can get away with 4 gigs of RAM. I used 8 gigs of RAM just so that I didn't run into any problems, just for a safety net. But I've seen people use 4 gigs. Next, we have our video cards. Now, this is what actually is doing the processing in the mining. And so this, you're going to use 6 video cards if you're building the same style of rig I am. Or you can use any number in between. Like if you want to just get started and you don't get the money for 6, you can start with 3, buy all the other components, and then just get video cards as the money comes in. That's an option as well. The video cards really are the piece that you're going to be spending the big bucks on. That's going to be the piece that you want the better quality equipment, because that's actually doing the hashing or the processing of the mining itself. And then you also have an extra of your power supply. Now the power supply is really important here because you're running all these different video cards that generally require their own sets of power. And so you've got to make sure to get a power supply that will support the number of video cards that you have, and that will power all those cards plus the other components without any trouble. Now you always want to err on the side of more wattage from your power supply than less, or just the right amount. So if you look at a rig and say, oh, this rig is gonna need 800 or 900 watts, you could get a 1,000 watt power supply. I may even ask you to consider a 1,200 watt power supply, just so that you're not getting close to that edge. Generally, when a power supply operates and it's 60 to 75% of max capacity is where it's its most efficient. So once you get running in the 80 and 90% of its max capacity, it starts to pull more power or use more watts than necessary, or than it would at a lower wattage. Now I'm going to show you some pictures here. This is what I had. I took these pictures personally. This is just a warning. Be careful not to use products that you're not sure of that are going to work, or components like splitters that aren't certified or recommended by the company. Also, if something stops working, check on it right away. Here's a picture of what happened to one of my rigs when I built it. You can see that the right here that the little prongs are melted off, and the metal is exposed. In this next picture here, this is what the power supply looked like. This whole chunk had melted off, and I couldn't see it, and I was yanking on it. It wouldn't come out, and I pulled and pulled, and finally it broke off. This was after 2 weeks. This card had stopped working that I had plugged into this guy, or these two cards, and after 2 weeks I was super busy. I was out of town. When I was home, I was like, you know what, sometimes the rigs just stop running. I'm going to leave it. I will get that up and running when I have a free second. And so after 2 weeks, I was like, all right, I want this to be mining and making me some money. I'm going to go take a look. And this is what I found. And so I got super lucky not to have my entire house burned down and problems caused because I had. This could have been due to a short in the power supply or in the cable itself, but it did damage the motherboard where the riser ports were dead, and it did obviously damage the power supply. It still was partially functioning, but it caused some damage. So just a word from the wise: be careful. When things stop working, go investigate and make sure that you're only using components that you one, have a warranty on them, and two, are recommended by the manufacturer, because that can lead to some problems that are not worth the benefit you could get from them. All right, hopefully that helped you out. Next, we have our video card risers. Now, a video card riser, let me switch over to the webcam here. Video card riser is this guy right here. It looks kind of funny if you've never worked with risers before. I hadn't touched a riser until I was in mining. That's why they were invented. So what they do is the video card sits, so you can see this is the long standard PCI Express slot that your motherboard was missing. They had those little mini ones. And you stick your video card in here, and you plug a USB right into this port right there. And then that USB has another adapter on the end right here. And this little adapter plugs right into the short PCI Express slot on your motherboard. Now what that does is it opens up space down by the rig so that you can fit 6 or 8 or 12 video cards onto one motherboard. There's no way you could get these big video cards onto, they're running like this size, 6 of them next to each other on a motherboard. So they have risers so that you can extend them up and hang them or fasten them somewhere else, and then have just this small piece plug in. Now this piece here is power for the riser itself to help the riser function. And so if your riser comes with a power port, 9 times out of 10 you have to use it. On some motherboards, they're a powered motherboard for the risers. I've found in my experience that doesn't work, that it's just safer just to run the I would always recommend a SATA cable, not the Molex style. That's the 4-pin. I wouldn't recommend the Molex style on the risers. I've heard of a lot of problems caused by those and melted components and damaged parts. And so I'd recommend the SATA component or plug, which is the 6-pin that looks like that. So you can see it. Hopefully it focuses. It's got 6 pins, and that's got 6 pins. And so I would recommend the 6-pin SATA power. Those are usually called the version 7 risers, not version 6, or 007, not 006. I'll link those in the bottom. They're the ones that I've purchased. I did try the Molex ones, the version 6s before, and they look old, and I've heard too many problems, so I upgraded to the version 7s. And so that's what a riser is. And so you're going to plug that right into your motherboard, and then this is what's going to plug into your graphics card, and generally that will hang. Some of the frames that you get, depends on your frame, some of the frames you get can support this here or here, but it's really not absolutely necessary. I found that I removed that support and added a support on the back of my frame, and this can hang attached to the graphic card, and as long as there's not a lot of pressure here, there's no problem. So that's how the risers work. All right. So after the video card risers, we had a simple power button. The power button I found is something I didn't consider when I was building the rigs, and so I got all ready and I said, shoot, how do I turn this thing on? Because I didn't have a standard computer case or frame. I was built on a wood and metal frame that was custom built, and obviously there's no power button built into that. And so I got all done and ready to go, and I said, dang it, I can't turn this on unless I jumped it with a paper clip or something, and I wasn't willing to risk my components doing that. So I ran to the store and got a power button. So I've linked also the power button down below in the components needed. And then obviously you're going to need some internet access. You need the internet so that you can hash and run your computer. Now I have 150 meg internet. It's not necessary to have that much, but I'm also running a lot of rigs at my house. And I wired them all. I trust wired internet more than wireless. My wireless tends to not reach in certain places in my home as well. So I have a big switch that I use, a big 32-port switch, where I plug in all of my cords, and then I clean them up and tuck them against the wall and staple them or tape them to the wall to keep them from being in the way. But yeah, you'll need internet run to your rig, to your router, or wireless internet if you go that route. I know a lot of people that do go that route, and they say it's just fine. I would prefer wired internet. All right, next, obviously, an Ethernet cable if you're going to do wired. You'll need multiple if you've got multiple rigs running. But if you're running one rig, one Ethernet cable is fine. However many motherboards you have is how many Ethernet cables you need. All right, and then a monitor. Obviously, you want to be able to get the rig up and running. I've heard people say that once you get it running, you don't need the monitor anymore. Initially, when you're first starting, it tends to crash a lot. I recommend having a monitor dedicated there. It's really annoying. On mine, you may have seen in the previous video, I have 3 stacked rigs. And so for some of them, I have one monitor, and I've just got HDMI cables running, and I can switch an HDMI switch. I can switch that to the monitor, so I don't have to have 3 monitors for each rig, or one for each rig. But I would recommend having a monitor there so you can turn it on, reset it, whatever you need, tweak it quickly. So a monitor, obviously an HDMI cable. Most monitors these days don't come with HDMI cables. They come with the old school VGA cables still. I guess they have a surplus and trying to get rid of them. I don't know. But you'll need to buy a separate HDMI cable unless it specifies that it comes with its own HDMI. And then a mouse and a keyboard. The reason I list these things is I found out the hard way. I didn't think of all the little accessories that you needed. Once I built it, I was stoked, and then I found out, shoot, I need all these little things, like HDMI cables and mouse and keyboard and all these extra little pieces. So I'm listing these here so that you're aware of them ahead of time. You need an operating system. Now, I run Windows 10, and so you'll need an operating system, which is Windows 10. Ether OS is one that's built specifically for Ethereum mining, or Linux works really good. I hear I'm not versed in Linux, and so I didn't want to go that route. I just ran Windows 10, which worked really well with my NVIDIA cards. If you're running NVIDIA likes Windows the best. AMD tends to work really well with Linux, but they'll work also with Windows. I'm running a rig with 5 AMD cards off of Windows 10 right now. So you want to make sure you have an operating system that's functional for your rig when it's ready to go. And then what I do is I stick my operating system on a USB drive. I just got a pack of 3 32 gig USB drives, and I take these 32 gig USBs and I put the operating system on here. And then when I plug this into the computer, turn it on, and boot the operating system from the flash drive, and install it onto the solid state drive that I have in the computer. So that was how I did that when I'm running 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rigs. It was nice to have it installed onto one USB, and I could just go rig to rig to rig and just put in the authentication code or the verification code to prove I purchased it, a new one for each rig, but I just had the installation on one flash drive. I also had a separate flash drive that had has the software on it that I needed. So any kind of drivers or the Claymore software I use for mining, I had on that, so I can just plug that one in when the computer's ready to go, drag and drop my software over, and I'm done. Made it really simple. So I got a 3-pack of these, and I used them all. All right. Next, you'll need a frame. You'll need something to put all this together on. And so there's lots and lots of frames out there. I bought a single rig frame initially, and then I gave it to a buddy of mine who's a metal worker, and he custom built me these 3 stacked rigs so that I could have more rigs in a smaller amount of space. And so if you just go on eBay or online anywhere, really just type in Ethereum mining rig frame, and they pop up, and they're just built to have, if you look at my previous video, I've got my rigs in that video for you, and you can see what they look like and what the frame is going to look like. It's very different than your standard computer tower. So, excellent. And then if you've got a frame, obviously it's not a standard computer case, and it's going to need some screws. And so, again, another piece that I didn't think of beforehand, but you need the standoff screws and the PC mounting screws that screw into that for the motherboard to screw into your frame. And so I've also linked those down below as well. All right. So this is a list of the optional components that you can get, the things that I found useful but aren't absolutely necessary to make it all run. So first of all, extension cords. I have rigs running upstairs, downstairs, in my garage, everywhere. And so I had to get some extra extension cords to run to different areas of my house to make sure they're on different circuits, so I wasn't tripping circuits. If I could put 2 rigs on one, but I couldn't put 3. And so I was running extension cords all throughout the house to make sure that I was on a different circuit for every 2 rigs. And so those could be helpful for you. An Ethernet switch. I bought a 32. First, I bought a 5-port switch. It worked great until I ran out of space. So then I bought a 32-port switch, and I haven't ran out. And so you'll need a switch if you're going to have multiple rigs. And then I bought an industrial Velcro, which is super, super sticky. And what that allowed me to do is allowed me to attach my power supply, my hard drive to the frame. And so I just put Velcro on the frame, Velcro on the side of the power supply, stuck it on there. So I wasn't having to worry about screwing it in, and it was attached so that if it got moved or bumped, nothing would fall off. So I found that helpful. If you find that helpful too, great. I hope that helps you out. Next, a surge protector. I got wall-mounted surge protectors. You just plug it in, and it's a surge protector at the wall. So it's not a stringed, a long extension string surge protector. And so I found those helpful. Obviously, if you have anything happen, any kind of power surge or lightning strike, you don't want your rigs to die, right? You spend a lot of money on these things. You don't want them to be damaged. And so I got surge protectors for all the outlets I was plugged in with any equipment. And an electricity usage monitor or a watt monitor, if you want to fine-tune your machine so it's operating at highest efficiency and capacity, you'll want to get one of these because you want to see what is your rig operating at and what can you do to those graphics card settings, to your other components to help it pull less power so that you're paying less overhead. And so that was super helpful. And then I got some gaff tape, just black. A lot of stagehands use it for events, for cords. They tape down cords. It's good on surfaces. It's not like duct tape. It doesn't leave a residue. And so I got gaff tape so that I could tape that to the carpet or to the wood floor or the linoleum or tile and not have residue, and it doesn't look terrible. So I bought that, and I thought that was super helpful. And then thermal paste. So your processing unit, your central processing unit, your CPU, a lot of those will come with thermal paste on them, and that's great, and it works just fine, especially for the ones that I've linked below. You're not going to be mining with your CPU. It doesn't do a whole lot. Your CPU is not going to be over processing anything, and so the thermal paste that's on that is great. If you're going to be using this rig as also a VR rig, a virtual reality rig, or you're going to be gaming on this rig as well, you will want to use a higher level thermal paste than the one that's on there. It's been on there for a while it's been stocked in the shelves, and it's generally really cheap thermal paste. So I'd recommend getting some of your own. You wipe off the stuff that's on that old one, you apply your new good thermal paste so that it really does help with the heat distribution on that CPU. Zip ties. So zip ties are necessary if you want your rig to look pretty. As you saw in my video before, I didn't zip tie anything. I didn't care. I'm not here to, I wasn't going out and looking for investors or anything like that, or trying to show off. I was just trying it out myself and seeing how it worked. So if you want to get zip ties, that's great. You can tie the cords up to the inside of the rig, and you can make it look really pretty. That's another extra piece you can use. And then anti-static protection. I tried a few different things. I tried the anti-static gloves, I tried the mat, and then what I ultimately landed on that was least obtrusive and most helpful were just the wristband, the anti-static wristbands that you connect to a ground, that you clip to a ground. And so there's a wristband, and then it's got a wire attached to it that you can just connect to a ground, and I just clipped that to the frame, seeing as I was working on, a non-static surface anyways. And so I'd recommend getting something like that so you're not shorting any of your equipment while you're trying to build it. That would be not a good thing. So make sure that you got something to protect yourself and your investment there. All right, so now that you know all the different components that are necessary, this next video I'm going to show you, or that I'm going to make for you here, is what is the time frame for paying off my rig? Is this going to be beneficial for me? Is this something that I actually want to get involved in, or is this just kind of a side hobby? Is this going to be, is it a money maker for me, or is it just going to be for fun? So watch my next video. It's going to be really, really insightful. I'll give you my exact stats, what happened to me, what I paid, for my rig and all my pieces, and what my current return is, what my return was when I first built it, and what you need to watch out for, and not to get your hopes up too high in certain areas. But it really can be beneficial if you do it right. All right. Hopefully that was super helpful for you. Post any questions or comments in the comment box below. I'd love to give you some advice and some support. Thanks so much. Let me know how I can serve you. DJ Crypto out.